Good Monday morning to you. And I guess now we are officially into the Christmas countdown, Christmas rush. And so I hope you're getting all that together and everything's going well and you got your week all laid out, ready to go. And we're going to start it off this morning by taking a look at the 44th Psalm. The 44th Psalm. The 44th Psalm is a psalm that we don't know the author or the background of. It simply says it is to the chief musician for the sons of Korah, and that is a fairly common superscription in the Psalms that really, again, doesn't tell us a great deal about the psalm or the background. What I will say, and many of you have heard me teach before and speak about the nation of Israel, is I often describe them as like a roller coaster. That they'll get up here, they'll be obedient to God, and their nation will be blessed, and everything will go well, and then they turn their back on God and intermarry with other religions and stop worship, and they'll come down here and they'll end up in some type of captivity or attacked by another nation. They'll repent, they'll come back up here, and it just seems to be constant as you read over the history of Israel, that roller coaster ride. And what we can tell for certain about this psalm is that this was on one of the downhill sides of the roller coaster. And what we have is a psalmist who is calling out and praying for his nation, praying for his country, and remembering, calling back on the good times, again on that top of the roller coaster moment, and wanting to get back there. And so as we look at this psalm, it's a good psalm for us, as especially in our world today, on how we can or should pray for our nation. For our country, and it can take a further, I think, application. I think you could take it and even take it further and apply it individually, not just corporately to a nation, but you could look at it as individuals and use some of these same principles to pray for yourself for a situation in your own life. But again, I do believe the broadest, most accurate application is in praying for our own nation. And the psalmist begins in verse 1 by, again, I mentioned that this was a psalm where he was praying to get back to the top of the roller coaster, and because he remembers when they have been there before. And so he is remembering, as we open the psalm, how God has delivered and taken care of Israel in the past. And so they are, again, recalling their previous victories. And certainly, depending on when exactly timeline that we have here, Israel could look back and have some magnificent high points, whether it's their deliverance from the Egyptian bondage, whether it's the walls of Jericho, some of the battles that they fought in leaving Egypt, and there are a number of times, David with Goliath. There are a number of times that they could look back at and see some really high spots. And one of the things that God had commanded the Israelites to do, that it does appear that they were always faithful, pretty much to be obedient to, was if you go back and you read through the Old Testament, God had been very forceful in telling the Israelites to record, to write down what God had done for them and the victories that they had, and to recite them to their children. And you can understand the purpose of that, to help build faithfulness, faith in God. And so they had, even the ones, as he says here, we have heard with our ears, O God, our fathers have told us what work thou didst in their days in the times of old. And so they had been faithful to this directive of God. They hadn't always been faithful to some of the others, but they had been faithful to this one, to rehearse, to recall the good things, the victories that they had had as a nation, and to tell their children and to remind them again of the strength and the faithfulness of God. And so I think that's a good, good example for us as well, to be mindful of recalling and remembering the blessings, the victories of God. We can certainly, if you're looking personally, we all have those, but if we're talking about this prayer in light of a nation, we certainly can look back over the history of our nations. If I know we have folks in other countries besides just America who watch and listen, but as Americans, as well as most countries, we can look back and see that there have been numerous times in our past when God has stepped in and intervened on our behalf and gave us great victory. And we need to remember that. And I think we need to be sharing those victories, just not only our corporate, national stories, but we need to be, I think that's one of the things that would be good for us to make a habit of taking and practicing sharing those things with our children, with our grandchildren, especially probably our grandchildren or great-grandchildren who are very small and growing up today. They're not hearing a lot of positive information about the Lord. The majority of what they hear is very negative, very anti-God, and they need to hear from their parents and grandparents how God has been faithful and how God has delivered. As we see that the psalmist here says, we've heard about the goodness of our Father, from our fathers. Verse 2, it says, how thou didst drive out the heathen with thy hand and plantest them, how thou didst afflict the people and cast them out. And so they are very specific here in saying that we know how God had, again, they're speaking specifically, I think, here of Canaan, how as they came out of Egypt, how God had delivered them again in a land where they were outnumbered, where they were, they were out equipped. The other nations were already entrenched, and yet God drove them out. It says you drove them out and plenished them. He says you did move them out, and so we have inherited the promise you made to Abraham, and we've seen you be faithful to that. For verse 3, for they got not the land in possession by their own sword, neither did their own arm save them, but by thy right hand and thine arm and the light of thy countenance, because thou hast a favor unto them. And so they acknowledge at this point again that it was God who had promised them the promised land, and then who had delivered the promised land. That they didn't do it on their own. And again, that's a great lesson for us to be sharing and passing on to our children and grandchildren, that we didn't get here because of our own strength or our own might, but it was God who has delivered us and fought for us, and I think there's we need to be doing that with our children and grandchildren, and we need to be doing some remembering ourselves as these folks are done, that God had been faithful. And so as we consider these three verses, I think there is a huge, very important principle or model laid out for us here in these verses, that we are always mindful that it was God who fought the battle, that it was God who gave the victory, and that if we have any victories in the future, then it will be God who fights those battles and brings those victories. And as John says in his gospel, without him we can do nothing. And so everything that we have physically, spiritually, our promised inheritance as spiritual sons and daughters of God are all the gift of God, all provided by God, because He loved us and He has chosen in His infinite wisdom and out of His free will to be gracious to us. And so this is a good passage coming out of the Thanksgiving season, to be mindful again of the mercy and the grace and the past victories that God has provided, but a great model for us to be sure and sit down with our children and grandchildren, with those young people who are growing up, who are hearing so much negative about our God, and to hear the truth. They're not going to hear it from CNN or Fox, or they're not going to hear it from any of those places about the goodness of our God. If they don't hear it from you and I, those of us who love Him and serve Him, then where will they hear it? And so I challenge you today, as you go through your day to day, find somebody, again, preferably one of your own children or grandchildren, but if you can't find one of them, maybe they're grown or whatever, maybe you don't have any children, find somebody today to tell them about the goodness and the faithfulness of God and what He has done and the victories that He has provided. That line from the song comes to mind: great things He has done. Let's be sure and share that news with a world that doesn't know Him. All right, you have a great day, and we'll see you back here tomorrow morning.